The computer is made up of many small components that, when put together, allow it to function. These components can be grouped into 6 larger parts. These parts include 1. The central processing unit, or CPU, 2. Input devices, 3. Primary storage, 4. Secondary storage, 5. Communication devices, and 6. Output devices. To better understand these parts, we are going to use an analogy to help you remember them. First, we are going to pretend your computer is like an empty room. This empty room represents the central processing unit of the computer, or CPU. This is the control unit where data like symbols, characters, and numbers are manipulated so we can understand them. All of the information that enters our computer must go through this room so it can be manipulated by the processor. In order for that information to get into the room, we need a front door. This front door will represent our input devices. Input devices are the things like a keyboard, mouse, touchscreen, or voice recognition. These devices are what allow outside data to enter the computer, just like how a door allows you to enter a room, or in our case, the central processing unit. Once inside the room, our computer will need somewhere to store that incoming data. Our computer stores data in 2 ways. There's the primary storage and secondary storage. For our analogy, primary storage will be represented by a whiteboard, and the secondary storage by a filing cabinet. The primary storage is where our computer stores things temporarily during processing, but are deleted once the computer is turned off. For our analogy, once the data enters the room, or the CPU, we will write it down on the whiteboard. This temporary data includes things like cache memory and registers. Once the processing is complete, that information will be wiped clean from the board. On the other hand, there is secondary storage. This type of storage is used to retain information we want to keep once the computer has been turned off. Examples of secondary storage you might use include hard drives, flash drives, and solid-state drives. For our analogy, the filing cabinet will represent these long-term storage devices. To recall what we have learned so far, outside data has entered the room through the front door via input devices into the room to be manipulated by the central processing unit. Once in the room, our computer will store this data on one of 2 places: the whiteboard for short-term memory to be deleted after processing, formerly called primary storage, or the data will be kept in the filing cabinet for long-term storage, formerly called secondary storage. At this point, we have entered the room, manipulated the data, and decided where to store it. But what if we need to access the internet or another computer network before we can leave the room and complete the data process? To solve this problem, our computers use communication devices. Communication devices are things like Wi-Fi connection or Bluetooth. In the event our data enters the room and needs to communicate with outside networks, it can use the internet connection in the room to perform this action. The last step in our analogy is for the data to leave the room or the CPU. To leave the room, we will add a window. This window will represent output devices. Output devices convert electronic data produced by the computer into a form we can understand. This data is translated through devices like printers, speakers, and monitors. And there we have it. You now know the basic architecture of a computer. Using this analogy of a room, we can see how data enters the room or the computer, is manipulated by the CPU, stored on either primary or secondary storage, communicated to other networks via communication devices, and is then translated by output devices so we can understand it. Now it's your turn. Grab a piece of paper and a pen and draw the room to show the architecture of a computer. Just remember the 6 key components of the computer. 1. The central processing unit, or CPU, 2. Input devices, 3. Primary storage, 4. Secondary storage, 5. Communication devices, and 6. Output devices. Who knew learning about a computer could be so easy?